Good morning, friends. A hearty welcome to the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. And today it's a pleasure for me to welcome Mr. Nitin Vyas, who's the Managing Director and CEO of Boimer India Limited, a 100% subsidiary of Boimer Group in Germany. Nitin has been instrumental during the last years in establishing all the business segments of Boimer Group in India, both in the field of bulk as well as discrete material handling. He has more than 18 years of industrial experience, having worked in Singapore and India. Pleasure to have you with us today, Nitin, on the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series.
Yeah, good morning to you and good morning to all the viewers. And thank you so much for thinking about me and inviting me over to this really great conversation and great topic.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Nitin. Nitin, let's come to the Boimer Group first. Now, the tagline of the company, Made Different, which is more than just a buzzword at Boimer Group. Tell us something more about it. And also, we would also like to hear from you, Nitin, about the journey of Boimer in India. I think you've gone through various stages. You've had an interesting acquisition also. So if you could briefly tell our audience also about the journey of Boimer in India.
So I'll start with a journey of Boimer and then I'll come to the Made Different because that's part of our DNA.
Right.
DNA Made Different, but I'll come to that in a moment. So Boimer started as a representative office in Mumbai in 2004 and primarily was dealing in cement industry, material handling with certain products, trying to get manufactured through contractors and subcontractors. But and then 2009 and 10 started going into aviation industry, into material handling system, baggage handling system for airports when Delhi, Bombay, Kolkata, these airports were being reconstructed and new systems were being put. And but it was a small company that time, around 20-25 people with so 400 million rupees of revenue. At that point in time, we had already a vision and a plan to set up a factory in India, and we were looking for land and all. At that point in time, somewhere in 2010, we got an opportunity to start evaluating an Indian SME called Anexco, which was in the same field of business, in cement, particularly in bulk material handling. And then we evaluated in 2012, we acquired. It was a long 2 years process of acquisition, which was very interesting. And we acquired, and then we started moving our offices to Delhi, the corporate office to Delhi, and amalgamation we started of Boimer and Anexco. At the same time, we started developing all our other business units, business segments like in mining and minerals for long distance conveying, in packing plant business, in airports, in logistics, and also customer support business, which was not being done as a focused business, and that's what we started doing. So it took that was interesting acquisition that we started the acquisition process somewhere end 2010, starting 2011. We had a share purchase agreement somewhere end of 2011, 2012 starting, and then we had to run two parallel companies. And 2016, we could get the amalgamation of the companies done, and then we got everybody together. And that was the interesting part, that when you bring two different companies, it's not just the businesses you are bringing two different cultures. And that was one of the most interesting tasks and interesting learnings. How do you bring the culture? Because the culture and behavior of the organization, whatever was there in the company which was acquired, was good for that particular company. And the culture and behavior of Boimer was also good and it was working. But how do you ensure that these two are not conflicting but getting complementing each other and become one culture in the long run, which is Boimer? And Boimer as a mission of Boimer is that we are looking for long-term success and not short-term profit. And that was the thing which we brought. And that takes me to the second part of Made Different. and why we believe we are made different. The very first thing what makes us different is our patience and our long-term vision.
Right.
In the present world, when the everybody is looking for quarterly results, quarterly profit, we are still a long-term vision company. We need profits, but the world does not end when the profit is not coming in a quarter. It's like when you run a race, when you run a marathon, or when you run a sprint, it's not necessary you are going to come first, but it's the intent with which you ran the race is important. And made different as a campaign or as a DNA, it works on two levels for Boimer. One is at a product level, which is physically and quality wise, it has to be different, it has to be better, it has to be best. So we believe that the quality of the product which is coming from Boimer, it cannot be a German quality, it cannot be a Chinese quality, it cannot be a Indian quality. It has to be a Boimer quality, irrespective of where it comes from. So that's one level. And the second level is the organization level, which we believe it's made different because the organization also thinks differently with its unique corporate philosophy, its corporate behavior, its six rules of doing business, five values, and nine leadership principles, which we work on it, and that's what we believe we are different, and we are always looking for lasting things, not just artificial and temporary gains. So, and we are quite independent in that manner. We have stayed independent. It's a family run, third generation, 100% debt free. So we are independent to think what we have to do for future, and we can invest, and we can invest in our R&D and research, other works, which are not driven by some short-term gains, but the long-term. That's why we believe we are made different, and that's what we campaign ourselves to be made different.
Well, very interesting. Very interesting to hear this concept from you, Nitin. And also, I think when you spoke about amalgamation of the two companies, I think as a leader, it must have been quite a challenging task for you to get two different entities amalgamated into one, get the work culture going. So maybe a few words on that, Nitin. How challenging was that task as a
I
leader? Yeah.
the first 1.5, 2 years, a year and a half before the amalgamation and 2 years after the amalgamation, it was hard work. It was a lot of patience, where you can't just remove everyone. You need to slowly find ways and means to bring people to adapt to processes, cultures. And you see, German companies are driven with lot of processes, lot of standardization, lot of tools. So if you have right tools, right standards, right processes, quality will automatically come. So, and then to getting these things into a proprietor, a owner-run company, a local small company, is very difficult, because where you have temptations to agree to anything and everything which is possible you can do in the world. Whereas in the framework of processes and standards, you can't do. And bringing that thought and culture was a hard task, and bringing the people at the same level, and to also give confidence to people that it's not the acquiring company and acquired company's employees, it is one company's employees, and that empathy part also need to come in a right manner. So it was challenging, but it was interesting learning for me also. But I think uh, we managed it well, I believe.
Right. Thank congratulations, Nitin. I think the way things have been moving in the last few years have been very positive, I think, and it's certainly getting these two companies together and then going forward with the whole group. And there has been a lot of, I think you've done a lot of investments also further to expand the product portfolio. So wishing you and the team a lot of success in the future also.
Thank
Nitin, let's come a little bit to the present scenario. I think the last 10 months have been totally unprecedented. In fact, the year 2020 is also called the Black Swan year. The global economy is in a phase of recession. In India, we are talking about a degrowth of about 8 to 9%, provided for our financial year, provided things go good in the quarter also. In your opinion, Nitin, what are the two or three forces that will shape the next so-called normal?
Uh, so a few things for sure. First, this was surely a black swan event. It was a true black swan event. And will it happen again? I believe yes. How we can wither it out? I think there has to be inherent robustness in the companies to manage it in a manner because this will come. Maybe we were complacent and we were taking things for granted. Uh, so it has brought a lot of negatives in the business. It degraded the economy. The 2 quarters kind of washed out.
Right.
The quarter starting from March till July, and these were clearly washed out. But the green shoots, when you see the quarter ending September, I think particularly month of September, it's the good numbers which are coming. But coming to the question you asked, that what are the things which will change?
Right.
I believe this event became a catalyst in speeding up the digital transformation part of the business all across. So digital transformation in some manner was happening already, but at its pace in some companies, at some companies who are the leaders, it was at the right speed. And digital transformation needs a speed and scale. If anybody wants to do it, it needs a high speed and a scale, which this particular event had became a catalyst and will speed it up. What shape it will take, we have to see, but it is for sure changing quite a lot. There is a lot of talk that supply chain, second point is that there are a lot of talk that supply chain will be reorganized, redone. That I'm not very confident that it will have a drastic change in supply chain because building a supply chain on a short term is very difficult for at least capital good industries like us. It will have a change, but I would say 3 to 4 years. There will be a slow pace of change in reorganizing the supply chains, but that will not be to counter yesterday. That will be to take care of future black swan events to build the robustness in the supply chain. So that will happen. So flexibility in supply chain will be brought in. It might not happen that you have an alternate area to procure, but flexibility will be required just to build a business continuity and robustness. Third, I believe there will be, as they say that when you study marketing and consumer psyche, that for 60 continuous days, if you do something with the consumer consistently, the consumer behavior changes. And I believe in the new normal, the consumer behavior and workforce habits are already changed, and it will be very difficult to reverse it at a global level. And this consumer behavior change and workforce habits change will need organizations to change how they work, how flexibility they have brought in their office work. So whether you call it work from home, home office, or flexible timings, whatever, but it will become ingrained into the human resource or people and culture policy, or it would be not something which is expected, which has to be there. And also consumer behavior, how we purchase, how we buy at the consumer level as well as at the business level. This will have some change how we are, and this will have one underlying effect, which I believe at least at the consumer level, packaging. Packaging will change. The way our consumer goods are currently packed, it will change. It will go a major transformation in the packaging, because it's not the shelf value we are talking, it's the online value we are talking. And when you receive the product, it will be different. So these are the 2-3 changes I believe which will speed up and will change because of the behavior changes and all. So this is my few thoughts.
Thanks for sharing these views, Nitin. Nitin, let's come a little to the other side. Are there any trends coming out of COVID that actually worry you, Nitin?
As an individual, I'm a always half glass full guy. So I would say I feel worried of the things which are happening, but for sure there will be challenges. There are challenges, and but I take them, the challenges, wherever I see a challenge, I believe there is an opportunity. So I equate challenge to opportunity. Uh, some of the behaviors which I saw during the peak of the COVID was the behavior at certain stakeholders of cash conversion, cash conserving behavior, and whether they need it or not. Uh, and I think the true sense of the responsibility of big corporates for me came out in open, and their behavior made very small companies suffer. So the only thing which worries me and uh, which came out a little open is the fabric of the industry, which is not only large company, mid companies, but also small companies. There is certain responsibility of large companies and mid-sized companies to take care of these small companies if all have to survive. And there I saw the disparity coming, and that worries me on the corporate behavior rather than any business issue. So that was a issue. See, the challenge will always be there whenever there is an unprecedented event like this, where the business starts falling down. Your revenues and cash falls faster than your expense.
Right.
And how do you balance and how do you behave that point in time? That's very important, and that's the challenge which will keep on coming in the life of a business manager in an organization again and again. And that's where the corporate behavior and large companies responsibility becomes much bigger, that how do they manage their expenses when their revenues and cash are depleting. And that's the only worry part. For we have been little fortunate, I believe, as a company, Boyman Group, we are a little diversified. So one single industry was not hitting us back. Uh, we are working on a large infrastructure projects which go up to 2 years, 3 years. So our revenues were not disturbed too much.
Right.
Cash flows were disturbed. The expenses were there. We had taken certain measure which helped, but for sure, one issue would be cash flow management, and second would be inventory management. That nobody likes to build the inventory these days because it's linked to the cash again. So in nutshell, it's I'm not worried about the challenges which has been coming. Those are opportunities, we can innovate ourselves, we can adapt to. But I'm only worry part is how the industry behaved irresponsibility towards the very small companies. And that way, when you look at some of the industry clusters, some of the industry clusters, very small companies vanished. And I don't hold always government responsible, but also the whole supply chain, the corporate world also responsible for that. And that was the biggest worrying part.
Right.
The true capitalism came into play.
Right. Right. One more point I had, Nitin. Do you feel COVID is, rather than countries looking at globalization, we are more tending to look inwards, more regionalism is coming. Do you think would that be also one of the impacts of COVID? to some extent, we had that coming before COVID hit us also. We could see the trade wars coming in between US and China, and US talk of America great again. So do you think this would be a trend that has been set, and perhaps COVID may accelerate some activities in this?
I didn't speak about that, and for the reason that I don't believe it will go at that speed. The when I look at the things, when there was a lot of talk was happening even in all forums within India, that uh, due to COVID plus the Chinese aggression on the LAC, that the supply chains will be completely done away, and there will be no manufacturing in China, or China people will move out. It didn't happen.
Right.
Didn't happen, and I believe it cannot happen because it's not so easy to build the supply chains within a day, within a month. So it was possibly I believe, little knee-jerk reaction. Yes, as I said earlier, in the medium term, 3 to 5 years, there will be supply chains flexibility will be built in. So there will be nearshoring will be done, localization will be done, but the global supply chains will one way or the other will remain. If you look at the output which China is doing right now in the last 2 months, it's unprecedented. They
Right.
have one of the best in last 10 years. So it will not go away. You can't replicate that supply chain, then manufacturing capacities, capabilities in a short term. Yes, 3 to 5 years, there will be some changes, but completely going local, it will be challenging. Uh, uh, for local consumers, possibly yes, but for global market, the global supply chains will not change drastically. That's my opinion.
Right, right. In fact, that's interesting because it, I think, is linked to my next question also, Nitin, because Nitin, India's share in global merchandise exports is about 1.67%, and our share in top globally traded items is actually very low. Now, with the onset of COVID, this has led to a global trade slowdown and also impacted India's exports. So we had a drop of exports by 60% in April, then around 36.5% in May. Now, also in the economic survey report, the government has spoken about global value chain. So what is essential, Nitin, is that India has to move up the global value chain. The items we are exporting actually are not, to a large extent, are not adding so much value, but where we can really add value, our export content there is very low. So in your opinion, Nitin, how can India move up this global value chain?
See, moving up in the global value chain, but whatever in the April, May, June, the exports drop. When I look at the numbers somewhere in September, that's promising. There is a
It's
6%
right,
increase in exports. Imports are still low. So that has helped the trade deficit to be narrowed. So it is less. It's one of the lowest, I believe, with China right now, the trade deficit. Uh, what can be done for increasing the global value add in the global value chain? I believe we are, as a country, for manufacturing, we are not yet there on a global footprint. Uh, we are missing some of the ingredients in the capability and capacity of manufacturing. So if you look at what we export, we are exporting automotive industry parts, because
right,
but automotive industry, if you see, is a very organized sector, and many a times when manufacturing is spoken in India, it boils down only to automotive
right,
primarily, and rest of the manufacturing has been forgotten kind of, and there is no development happen. And if you just look at the growth of automotive, why they are sustainably able to export and with a sustainable quality, is that they develop the supply chain and the value first for the Indian consumer.
Right.
Once it was stable and they started producing quality, they were able to go.
Right.
Whereas in the other manufacturing sector, on day zero, we want to export. That's not going to happen.
Right.
If we take a case even of China during the financial crisis 2008 and early 2000, whatever manufacturing was initially started, it was for the consumers over there and then moved into exports. And India, we have one of the biggest strength is our consumers.
Right.
We are still a 1.3, 1.4 billion people country and one of the very high consumers. And if we are able to ensure that we are manufacturing for these consumers at a high quality and able to sustain the quality, just like the automotive industry, I believe we should be able to export and add into the global value chain.
Right.
For me, the ingredient to be in a value chain, global value chain, is consistent quality, product innovation. We are not there in the product innovation, and many of the companies are not investing enough. Indian companies are investing enough in the research and development. Even if we have a technology transfer,
Right.
we are not growing that technology. We are freezing that technology and trying to do it. So these two, till we do, we are not going to go very nicely. It would be good to have presentations, but in reality, it will not be there unless we have a consistent quality and innovation clubbed as the main part of our manufacturing or production in India.
Right. I think very valid points, Nitin, especially product innovation, because traditionally Indian companies do not invest much in R&D. We have the global average, whereas it is about roughly around 2.5%. India lies somewhere below 1% also in the investment. So I think unless that is certainly I think one aspect where if India has to add more to the global value chain, I think our uh, R&D activity should also increase.
R&D activity,
Yeah,
R&D activity, and there has to be lot of play has to also be done by the top institutes like IISCs, IITs,
right.
and the collaboration between the industry and the institutes is not that great.
Absolutely.
And that, if you look at any of the IITs right now and look at their grants, the grants for R&D will be more from foreign companies and foreign countries than from Indian companies. And that's a sad part, that IITs are still generating patents, but those patents are not for the Indian companies. It's for the foreign companies. There is a value, but we are not harvesting that value locally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, Nitin, in a recent McKinsey report, they use the term missing middle. Now, I found this quite interesting. Actually, as per this report, they say India has certainly we know, of course, we have a large number of small enterprises, and actually very few large enterprises. In fact, in this report, they mentioned we have only about 600 enterprises which have a turnover of higher than 500 million USD. Now, for India's growth story, in this report, McKinsey has mentioned that about 1,000 mid-sized companies would have to move to the large company level, and almost 10,000 micro small enterprises would have to move into the mid-size. So our at the moment our difficulty is that we have too many small enterprises, which of course are contributing, but due to that we are not really able to contribute also to this global value chain. What is your take on this?
I have been for years talking wherever I get an opportunity, that if India growth story has to be there, and Indian manufacturing has to grow or Indian business has to grow, the mid-sized companies have to grow. Uh, and if you take example of just steel, India is one of the large producer of steel, and we have the large players on steel like Tatas and Jindals. And then we have very small micro rolling mills, very small, which are low. There is nobody in the middle space who is attempting or doing anything on the steel, maybe specialty steel. We are so poor in metallurgy that many of the metals we are still importing. Some of the metallurgy we are still importing from Japan or Germany, and that's where the R&D is missing, and the middle space is completely empty. And you would pick any industry, middle space is completely empty. Either you have very small, micro small, or large. And until this middle, these small companies are growing up to middle, we are not going to win this game of manufacturing or exports and all. So I was just going through some of the numbers. There are in India around 5,000 industrial clusters, and these are into, like, for example, bicycle in Ludhiana, knitwear in Ludhiana, textile in near Coimbatore in Tripur, and these create 5 to 10 million jobs every time. Whereas if you look at the large companies, they are not generating that kind of job. They are getting more automated. So it is in the interest of the nation that we help these micro small companies to grow, graduate to medium size. Now, what is the challenge? Why they cannot grow? They are not rightly funded. They are lacking the quality. They are lacking the processes. These are still moving in a very small enterprise run by a few people, which have not a vision to move it to next generation or to do a growth. So I think it's lot can be done by industry associations, which focus on these micro and small industries to handhold them, not only on getting them the business, but handholding them in getting the right processes, right technologies, and they can be made as a cluster. Uh, a single small micro or a small company might not be capable to do a R&D on its own. So need to take these clusters and develop the clusters and develop together with them a model where the R&D is done, innovation is done and brought onto their premises so that they can move ahead up in the value chain. And it has to be an integrated approach, integrated program, and there government has to play its role to helping them. The financial institutions, banks have to play a role in that. But I believe quite a big role is of the industry for the big, large players, for companies, mid-sized companies like us. We have a role to play where we need to ensure that we develop these micro, small companies more robust, more professional. We are taking, for example, we have taken a project in-house that we are identifying these small micro companies and trying to see how to bring in 5S over there, or how to implement Kaizens, how to improve their quality programs, how to develop the skill over there. And it is to our benefit that when we develop these suppliers, but this is on the skill side, but also on the finance side, we need to help them, we need to bring. And unless we get this middle companies and club them with innovation, we are not going to win this game of manufacturing or exports. And we, as a country, we are missing it completely. We need to create these integrated programs and forums where these can be collectively taken care of.
Right. I think very valuable thoughts here, Nitin. And I think, as you correctly mentioned, I think together, pooling the resources together, much more could be achieved by these small and micro enterprises, especially as you correctly mentioned, this cluster approach. Nitin, coming to the last question for today. Now, if we look at the scenario presently, Nitin, COVID has impacted businesses and the workforce. What we would like to hear from you, Nitin, is 2 or 3 tips on leadership skills, how a leader can navigate his boat in the stormy water of COVID. And I think these suggestions would be of extreme value also to all our viewers as well as the CEOs of the German companies.
So I'll maybe give answer in two parts. The first part, which I think I studied sometime back in management school, that whenever a crisis comes, uh, there are three pillars to manage the crisis. And the first and foremost pillar of the crisis is to acknowledge there is a crisis. First, accept and acknowledge there is a crisis. Second, the leader of that particular organization or that whether it is a school or a institution or a manufacturing company, the leader has to take ownership of going through the crisis. It's acknowledging the crisis, taking the ownership to lead the things from the front. And third, which is also very important, is to do correction, course correction, continuously with a very high speed. So acknowledging the crisis, taking ownership of the crisis, and doing the correction continuously at a very high speed. This would be the first part, which is taught to every management student in their life, but we over the time we forget about that and we get complacent. The second part, which I live by as a mantra for running any task, any organization, is the resource allocation, the right resource allocation at right time, and that has to continuously change. And where the results are not coming, it is more important to have a focus on the resource allocation and resource adjustment. And that's what I believe in two parts. Any crisis one can manage. All other things with respect to expense management, revenue management, those are byproducts, and that one has to do it. Like what we did till July, we were on daily basis, we had our risk management on every project level, every customer level, and every supplier level. So at three levels, we were having a risk management, and there were so many sheets that we had to do risk management or risk evaluation on every basis. So that's a execution part. But as a broad guideline, it's acknowledging the crisis, taking the responsibility for the crisis, correcting it, and the second part is resource allocation, right resource allocation at right time.
Right, right. And Nitin, if I may just ask, how have you, since it's been work from home or working remotely, that has worked well within the organization? How have you kept in touch with the other colleagues or with the workforce during this period of crisis, Nitin?
So we on 23rd March the lockdown was announced by the government. We 2.5 weeks back we had some, I do not know, some sense in our HSC team or business continuity plan team that we started already work from home 2.5 weeks in advance.
Okay.
So we not for everyone, we started doing like every department, we created small teams based on the projects and all. And based on that, one team stays at home, one team's come to office, different businesses, so different departments. So for example, one project, somebody is from sales, somebody is from project, somebody is from engineering, somebody is from production. So that one team was there in office. So that we started doing it. But when 23rd March came and the lockdown came, we had our templates on daily basis what to check, and these team leaders were already identifying what to do, how to handle, and that worked fine. We were back in office pretty early. In the May, we started coming back with 25-30%, and by this time we are full. So we did a survey also within our company with around 40 data points on work from home scenario, how it will happen, what do you think it's for future. So it's a mixed response what we saw, that for possibly engineering, heavy engineering driven companies and capital goods companies, it might not be the best solution. There is some interaction needed, some brainstorming needed, and but for certain tasks which are related to software, IT, yes, you can do work from home. But when there is an integration process comes, you have to be there. One of the biggest examples, what we have, and we just received the award last week, we have a huge project going on in Bangalore, for Bangalore Airport. And we have teams working in Bangalore, in Gurgaon, in Singapore, in Denmark. In traditional times, customer used to go for some high level control we call. So factory acceptance test, they were going either to Denmark or somewhere. So this time also they were supposed to go, but traveling was not possible. Everybody was working from home. We had to create a virtual network and virtual EFAT, and which was much better in terms of output and satisfaction of customer, which we had never envisaged and which we would have never done if it was not for COVID. So I think if you empower the resources and if you have right allocation of this resources at a right place and you set up right checks and balances, your health safety team is in there in place, people are smart enough to find ways to get the efficiency back to normal.
Right. So thank you, Nitin, for this insightful discussion, and I think for sharing your experience and views and your thoughts on various topics. It was a pleasure interacting with you, Nitin, and on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, and all of the VDMA India team, wishing you the very best in the future journey of Boimer in India. Also, wishing you and the team Merry Christmas and all the best for 2021, Nitin. And thank you for sparing your time to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for so nice interaction. I loved every bit of it, and wish you and the complete German Engineering Federation a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
Right. Thank you, Nitin. Stay well, stay safe then. Thank you. Goodbye.